Alright everyone, welcome along. Training Tuesday. So last week we started looking, didn't we, at Datamarts and using data flows to start to manage and run through and do your refresh cycling. So what I want to do is have a quick look back at the data flows and Datamarts piece, and then what we're going to do is we're actually going to expand on what we've got as our existing data model. So what I was going to do was bring through some of the additional pieces and demographics that we've got around people and place in England. Now, for our example, that's what we're doing, but the reality and the reasoning behind all this is it's to get you to start to understand that your data modeling is not a one and done activity. It's an ongoing process. At no point in my professional career have I got to the point with a data model for me or for the client where we've gone, job done, that's it, finished, no more to do. It's always been, what's next? How are we evolving this? Where do we go next? How can we bring this area of the business into it? How can we consolidate these multiple areas into a single piece? How do we start? Yeah. And that's where we keep going back to. This is the bit I'm really trying to get you to understand, that you need to be thinking about your data and your insights across the whole business. How do we get that one data model to rule them all? And don't worry if you never get there, right? That might be an unachievable dream, but the aim always has to be the same, yeah? It's like one of the things I always used to say when we used to build service desks, right? The goal of a good or an excellent service desk is to have 0 tickets. Never. The phone never rings. No one ever has any issues. That has to be your goal, right? If your goal is we're going to answer 10,000 tickets in a month, you're coming at it the wrong way. Just like in that, with your data, you need to be saying, I'm going to have one data set serving everything, because we're going to consolidate, we're going to standardize, we're going to do everything, because with that mindset, you will tackle every aspect of your business and you will transform and change everything that you need to do. So let's cut an hour into Power Automate for now, have a look at the flow, then we'll go on the Datamarts and then we'll start expanding on it. Champion. Alright, so I'll have a look at this first, right? I've put in this, right, just as a little bit of a sample. Some of the work I was doing earlier, I thought, let's actually show you a couple of these. Just knock this up, didn't take me too long, right? And we've put in 3 data flows, or 3 flows that are going to actually start to manage the scripts. And then I've got them telling me what's happened. So what we get with each of these is it's coming back and it's telling me the name of the flow that I've used, and I've just renamed the title. I've created a new field instead of title. You can rename the title, it's the right way to do it, okay? And I've just been lazy and done it this way, right? Put a description in, and in this case I've got the start, the end, and the success, or the status of it, and then a counter, right? And I've got a counter in because, as you can see, the way I've got this written is it can be incremented. So what you can do is you can build up scripts that will start to track what's going on, and then because you've got it here, you'll see that one of the things you can do in here is you can obviously export it to Excel, but you could connect this to a Power BI report, have a Power BI report, read this in, and produce insights based on that, right? So you can start to really track what you're doing in your business, and that's kind of what you wanted, wasn't it? What flows are being run, what automation, are there issues that we've got? And all I've done is a SharePoint list, which frankly, almost anyone in most businesses can set up, right? They're not difficult to do. They really aren't rocket science. So what have we done? Let's have a look at this, okay? So obviously, first off, as always, if you, in your business, are here and you go into your cloud flows and this is where everything is that you're working on, okay, that's a mistake. Everything that you're working on, you need to make sure it's in your shared with me, and that means that you're sharing it with others, so you aren't the only person who has access to it. Because if only you have access to it and you leave, it can be a bit of a nightmare for anyone to get hold of it. So let's start by going in and having a look at the start one. Okay, this is the scheduled one, so the start, the first one that I'd run. Okay, you could use a Power Automate script for this, like I've done here. Okay, or you could use your data flow scheduling. Either option will work, right? I've just put it in here as if we were going to set everything up. So what we've done is I've got this written here. So if I hit edit, let's have a look at what it's doing. So we've got a recurrence, telling it to refresh the data flow, and the big change from what we showed last week is we're using this create item. So I've got something in here that we can do. So you're essentially putting in a row in that SharePoint list for everything. And that becomes the way that you think about your scripting. So everything you do, you're always thinking, we run something, we write back into it. So you get into that point from a more of a business perspective, business process analyst perspective, that you're using log files. You're starting to log things, right? So we've got logs being written too as things are going through. And again, this is a reason for saying, well, let's have one running, because this takes 16 milliseconds to run. Nice, it's quick, it's punchy. If we go back to our flows and we look at the next one, right, the start to the east countries, okay? I was doing a little bit of work on this to get this to work. It's one of those things, I always forget how to do it. So if we come in here, we've got the trigger, which is when that one finishes. So when the first one finishes, go and get the items, okay? And it comes through and it reads in everything from the SharePoint list, right? The key thing that you're doing is you've got here, right? So we're only looking, there we go, at the areas that are important to us. So we've got that. We're going to pull back just the ones that relate to here. And we just want the top row based, date created, descending order. So the latest ones at the top. We just want the top ones, we want the latest area. You're then going to initialize a variable, right? And honestly, I've gone through loads of ways trying to get this to work. This is the way that was easiest in the end for me. And I was trying to work out if I could get away without doing it this way. And honestly, in the end today, I've gone back to this because seeing it works. So you initialize an array variable and then you apply to each, because your get items is going to be an array of items. So it's an array. So you use a variable, you initialize a variable, you put it as an array, and you give it, here is the array of 1 in this case, okay? Then we use a compose component, all right? And I've just written a little bit of a script in here, so, sorry. Breaking it down, we want the first record, bearing in mind there's only one, right? You have to use that because honestly, trying to get it to get you just the counter column from your SharePoint list is a nightmare. The apply to each, right? So in practice, this is what works. So you do it as an array variable, and then you can use the first variables from that variable. So the first row from that variable, convert it to an integer. So because it needs to be an integer to then be able to do everything. And then I'm adding 1 to it, okay? Right, that's simple, right? We're going to then refresh the next data flow and then create the item recording how everything went the last time, right? Don't worry too much about it, but think through. So we've got to pull these things through. We've got to do this, we've got to do that, right? Because in practice, right, the real one that you need to do, the way it needs to work properly is this, right? So in here, this is the next one where we've said, right, East Counties has finished. We're going to initialize the variable. So case 1 is in the event of a success. So what we're going to do is we're going to refresh the data flow for East Midlands. Okay? We're going to create something, and we're going to say, in this case, East Counties to East Midlands. So we're saying we're going to the next one, counter 1. Okay, because this is the first time it's run, isn't it? Right? In the event that it failed, case 2, so it's failed, status equals failed, let's have a look at this. We're going to get the items from that. Okay, we've got the filter on it, so we want it to be where based on the start, so the previous one. Sorted that whole thing out. We're then doing that apply to each, just like we did in the other one. Composing it to build up that statement and increment the count, because remember before it was counted as 1. We're checking it. Is it less than or equal to 5? If it is, it's failed, so we refresh it. If not, we would do something else, and that would be potentially email me, do something. So you can start to piece those things together. You've got that branching logic, and each and every time you can be recording your status updates. Gary, so one of the things that we do, or that's done by the Office of National Statistics, is to actually start to look, and this is in the UK, at what they call the index of multiple deprivation. It's a really commonly used thing around when you're doing population metrics across the UK. So there's a few things that we can look at. So I was thinking, well, should we look at population density? Should we look at IMD? Both of which we can do quite easily. What I've also done though is I've brought this through down in the level that it's up to. So we can actually take the maps that we have and zoom right in on them. So you can really start to see what's going on. So here's Newcastle down at that IMD level, and we can see some areas are in 10s, so really high up. And then we've also got some areas that are down in 1, so like most parts of the world, or most parts of most cities in England. So if we went to South Tyneside, for example, you'll see it'll flip across and it'll show us South Tyneside. Now the main problem with this is it's a bit slow, right? It's not the quickest, just because of it's more the map is the issue. You've got far too many things on that shapefile. So again, it's not ideal, but will it work? And if you sit there and you say, right, I'm doing my analytics for me, I need to be able to actually get down to that level, understand quickly, easily, efficiently for our Northeast what's going on with it. And that's something that you will do in the world of work. As you can see, if we went and looked at the actual content of it, there isn't anything that really makes sense in terms of this makes sense to look at. Like their names, like Harrow 030C, rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Most you're going to struggle. So you kind of work through those things. This is one of the things that we'll deal with. But what I was thinking was, I wanted to understand, is there an impact in terms of food hygiene rating based on things like IMD? Because that's generally what we would look at and say, is this a more affluent or a poorer area? You know, conventional wisdom, is it conventional? Or, you know, the assumption that you might make, the bias that you would bring, might well be that a more affluent area is going to have better quality takeaways. Or is it a case actually of, if we combine that IMD, are we going to see that there's less food establishments or less takeaways in more affluent areas versus restaurants? And all of a sudden, you want to change your analysis and suddenly flip it, okay? So you might want to have that drill down view where we can come down to a particular local authority, and on that local authority page, we have this map on a page that we can look at and get that real detail at that local authority level. Bear in mind, this is a shape map, not a map. Two are very different, okay? But it would work, wouldn't it? So what have I done? Okay, so we've got already our geography data flow, haven't we? Where we've got things like countries, CPI, right? So the corruption perception index that we've got, okay? That exists already. What I've built though here additionally is I've put in this postcodes piece, which is going to allow us to look up a postcode to one of them small little areas, those lower layer super output areas. Okay, that's important because your IMD, so your index of multiple deprivation, and a lot of the other metrics that you can get from ONS are down at that really granular level, which is ideal if you're wanting to really understand what's happening locally. That'll make a massive difference to you. But you need to figure out, as we said, how are you going to cope with, well, what's that losser? What does that mean? Okay. The key thing is you can pull it in, you've got your shape file, but have a think about how you would name it. And there are other things you can do. We can bring ward information in that might make that easier. Potentially, you'd move away from using LSOA and do your ward. But what we're getting into here is what? What are we up to? Granularity, okay? Granularity is something you're always going to have to discuss when you're talking about the differences as to what's going on. What do I mean? If we're talking order to cash, for example, you're going to have line items on your invoice, aren't you? So your shipping will be talking about items. We shipped the 15 items to the customer, but that might be 15 of the same. It might be 5 of one type, 10 of another type. They've all been shipped though. So your order to cash is looking at, well, how much cash are we waiting? You know, how much do I need to get back in? Where is it? What's going on? What's outstanding? And the reasoning or the items that are outstanding haven't been paid for are less important than the amount in that granularity sense. So you're always going to get that you're going to need to be thinking, and that one area doesn't need that level of detail, but the other area does. And all your reporting has to be at the lowest level for any area that's going to use it. So you always have to think that. So what we've found in the food hygiene is we've got reasonably good data for postcode. Now postcode, I've written the LSOA lookup for it, taken it from, downloaded it from a website. I'll put the link down below to it. Downloaded it. I've just cut a few things out of it. I've also cut some demographics out of it because it's all right. Things like population figures, which would be nice to have. Whether it's urban or rural, potentially there's that involved as well. Starting to piece together, but you can suddenly see we're taking our analysis to the next level because we can suddenly get more information in than we're pulling just from that. The nice thing with this, and this is again why I keep saying about I'm not fully convinced about some of the stuff that Microsoft is saying about Datamarts, is what I've done with these are all data flows. They have their own refresh cycle. Now you've got incremental refresh, blah, 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 that you can do with your data marts, right? But when it comes down to this, when you think, well, the postcode data, I'm going to get it once a year, we'll update it. I don't need to do anything to refresh that ever. So use data flows, have those separately, and you can then run those and manage those separately. There's going to be other options available to you, but for me, I always want to think about my individual entities separately. And I will be thinking about them in groups. So we've got like this core data, and we can see geography has a few things, the postcodes England has a few things in it because it's coming from the same source. So it might be a source system, and you might have one pull from that source system with multiple tables in it. But you're generally thinking about them separately, you're running them separately, and you're managing their refresh cycles separately versus putting it all into one thing and then just, it'll all work kind of at the same time. And if we think through, we separate it, we then bring in what we just talked about before with the Power Automate scripts, it all starts to really piece together and get you that consistent cycle where, yes, it might take longer to go through and be completed, but I know step by step that everything has gone through successfully, especially knowing that Power BI, the way it does run the refreshes, is it runs the full refresh in parallel. So you have two sets of the data with the second set growing. Once that's complete, it then shuffles off and retires the old one. So it's only when it's done does it get transferred over. So if it fails in the middle, well, you've still got data, but it's not being necessarily refreshed. So it's kind of, so what I've done is I've added in deciles. Okay, so we've got all the local authority and the LSOA information, and we've attached that to the attributes. So is it IMD, is it crime, is it health, is it employment, is it wealth, right? And a decile. So we can suddenly start to say, oh, this area is here, oh, this area is there, oh, where's this? So we can then start to say, this takeaway or this restaurant, this whatever it is, food establishment is in an area of versus, okay? So suddenly we're starting to get, we can piece these things together. So how do we do it? Where does it all need to go? So over here in our Datamart, we just need to click and it'll open it up and then we can go to edit it. Right? And this is why I keep saying, these are your primary PBIXs. This is what you want to be doing. This is where we're going to build our model. This is where we're going to draw the strands of our business together. This is where it all starts to come together. And if we go through this process and we say, well, consistently, we're going to come in here, and I might start with my warehouse and then go through to my finance, or I might start with my warehouse and finance as two separate data marts. That's fine. And then we look at how we can merge the two together. All of this is right and works. It's down to your business and your needs. But for us, what we're doing today is we thought, well, let's add these in. So what we do is we go into get data. We're going to choose back to the Power Platform, pick our data flows, sign in, hit next, and then we can pick what it is we need. So it's going to be workspaces, it's in our data core, isn't it? And it's going to be this postcodes one. So let's bring through the deciles and the LSOA lookup for now. In theory, we might bring through the demographics as well, but you can see suddenly we're starting to expand, okay? We've now got much more information in and available than we had before, okay? I can start to really build and grow my data set. Because I've got the LSOA lookup here, we can see what I've got. I've got postcodes, and I've got that goes to an LSOA. Now, what I was going to do, this is one of the things that I wanted to do, is I'm going to actually tell this I don't want it to load. But what I do want to do is I want to take my food hygiene ratings, and it was a case of these we need to merge. So if we merge the queries here, where we've got postcode, and again, this is why you end up having to do lots of data quality work to piece these things together, because we can see even on the 4 that we've got here, we've got missing rows. And we bring that in with the LSOA lookup, we've got the postcode, okay? And then just click OK. Okay, let's see how well that works. Potentially, this would be something that we would look to do in the data flow. So there is a data flow running for the food hygiene ratings. Do it there rather than here in the Datamart. Again, thinking through building that efficient and effective data strategy is really what we're saying here that we want. So all we really need here, we're going to untick that, use the original column name, is the LSOA code. Okay, so that's come through. We've now got a column there of values. We've got deciles in as well. So we can now save that. And suddenly, I've started that process of expanding my data set. It'll run through, it'll validate everything. We can go in, update the relationships, and keep moving it forward. And suddenly, you get to that point where your extended analysis and your growth cycle is far more embedded in the way that your business works, and data has become the topic. Insights are part of your day-to-day discussion. There's no more patronage of just, oh, well, I feel it's like this. It suddenly becomes, I had a suspicion about, I've looked, I found, do you agree, do you disagree? It's a very different discussion versus the, well, I believe it's this because I know more, I've done blah. Okay? Because honestly, one thing I know is I don't know it all. I can look at things and I can have a pretty good guess as to what I think it is. I don't know, but I know that I need to actually go and look more into that logic and understand a bit more about what's going on. All right, so here we are, we've pulled it all through now. It's in here. The interesting thing is, it's pretty much, wow, right? Honestly, I had no clue. It pretty much is there, isn't it? That as you go from lower areas or lower IMD areas, so more deprived areas, through to more affluent areas, there is definitely a change in ratings. We can see that. It's not huge, but there's a definite change. Interestingly as well, I noticed that numbers change. So if we were looking at, say, just the takeaways and sandwich shops, we can see that really drops down. And we can see again, the food hygiene, it changes. So there's stuff there. I love it when data does this for you because it just kind of blows your mind. Okay. What we've got though is we've also got the ability to check. So we can look at where like adult skills as a subdomain, and we can see that affects it. There's a change. That definitely is a drop off as you get higher into that. So there is other components that go into this that it's well worth having a look. So health deprivation, how does health affect it, and access to healthcare. All these things that we've now done. So what have you reckoned then? Okay. In all honesty, that didn't take long to do, right? We've shown how we built it and how you bring through a new data set or a new part to expand your existing data sets, to bring about that one data set to rule them all that you want in your business. So we've kind of got that. But in terms of the amount of time it took, it hasn't taken me really much more than 2-3 hours or so in terms of going, pulling that in, doing it. That's the reality for most businesses as well. You will have experts within a particular area who know how to get their data out, what's needed. You may find, I've already got the SQL scripts written that are going to extract it, right? You can start with those by building up your data flows then in line with that and going down that route and structuring what you're doing and using that. You'll find that you can keep growing and expanding your data sets. Now, I've seen a lot recently with Microsoft really pushing that, data marts are going to replace data flows. I genuinely don't agree, right? I really don't, because that single schedule for a refresh just isn't going to work for you. It will not cut it in the real world with what you need, right? If you get to an enterprise grade, right, massive, big, premium capacity, right? You've got premium capacity. You can't refresh everything without flooding your premium capacity. So you're going to need to schedule it and think through and run it, and then you might have chain data flows, which of course you now know how to do using Power Automate scripts to then flow through and allow your flows to trigger other flows, and be able to track using the log files that we're going to write and have, or the logging that you've got. You can start to track what's going on. You can be aware, you can understand. If you're doing the full premium capacity route and you can see how much your data flows are doing, you can actually cost those out. You could potentially look at, can we recharge some of that to back into the business if you want to go down that route? There's a lot there, and we're still kind of just unpicking it. And even doing this, there's a couple of things I've come across with Datamarts that I'm just like, I don't like, I'm not sure about. I'm not going to talk about them because, we're 2 weeks in to kind of that first release. It's still very much in preview. So it would be wrong, I think, to put in and say, I didn't like. So let's keep it positive. They are a great step forward, but remember, think of them as your primary PBIX file. That's your main file that you're going to use. You're then going to have your report content on top of that, and it's going to be fed by multiple data flows depending on systems, departments, whatever works for you in your business. It could be schedules, it could be anything, right? You will know better than me. So don't forget, stay safe, have a great week, take care, ta-da.